guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope everybody's summer vacations are off to an amazing start. For today's video, I'm sure you could tell by the title, I'm going to be focusing on the VMCAS application and how you guys can go ahead and tackle that application. I know the due date is September 17th, so it's important to start as soon as possible if you haven't already. At first, I want to cover a few things that I think are really important, and I'll get further into detail later on. But if this is something you're interested in and you'd like to know, then please continue watching the video. Okay, so first off, before you even start your application, there is a link on the page to a prerequisites chart. So this includes every accredited veterinary medicine program and their required prerequisites to be accepted into vet school. So if you know what schools you're interested in applying to, I would go ahead and look at that prerequisites chart, look at what classes they require, and make sure that you've either taken all of them or that you can plan to take them in the spring or this summer before you graduate school. If you've already finished school, just make sure that you've taken those classes or that you can hurry up and take those classes. It's important to keep in mind that some schools, for example Tuskegee, requires that all your prerequisites are completed before you even apply. So if you haven't finished those courses, that's something to think about. You can either finish them like now this summer, or you're gonna have to apply the next application cycle. There's other universities where if you're graduating in the spring, but you're filling out the application now, they'll allow you to finish those courses in the spring. So it just depends on the school you're looking into. I would look up on that, make sure that all of that is in line beforehand. Okay, so another important thing is your transcripts. You have to manually enter all the courses you've taken yourself in the VMCAS, but you also have to send the schools all your transcripts. So that's a really important thing, because when I was applying, I had an issue where one of the schools didn't send my transcripts, but I didn't know about it because I paid for it. I had everything finished, but I didn't know that my transcripts were never sent until like after the VMCAS cycle. And they were basically telling me like, oh, we can't look at your application because you didn't get your transcripts. And I had to send them like verification, like I paid for it before, way in advance. So that's really important. And if you can get your transcripts out, like for courses you've already finished, if you could send them now, that would be the best, because if you could get it out of the way before the application cycle ends, you won't end up in my position where you basically have to beg for them to look at your application. And you know, some things are out of our control, but things do happen. So if you can ensure that that's out of the way early, you're set. All right, and one other thing before we get into this application, I've spoken about it in another one of my videos, but basically having a notebook labeled like your vet school notebook or whatever, that's what I had, but where you write down every experience you have, whether it's with animals or research or whatever, but just writing down like what days you're there, how many hours you spend, what you do. That way when you're going back to fill out your application, you have everything written down, so you don't have to, off of the top of your mind, remember for the past like umpteen years everything you've done. You'll have it all right there in that notebook. So if you're applying now, it might be a little too late, but you can start writing down all the things you're doing this summer. But if you're looking to apply in the future, that's something to think about. If you can start this now, early, that's really beneficial, because you won't have to kind of like estimate and guess on what you did in these places if you can't remember. But that's about it. Now we can get into the VMCAS application. So when you first log on to the website, it's gonna ask you to select the schools that you're interested in. So you just go through, they have every single DVM program, whether it's in America or not, listed on there. So you go ahead and you select all the schools that you're interested in applying to. Keep in mind that you do have to pay for all these schools, and it does get a little expensive, but it'll tell you after you've selected all the schools what your total is looking like so far. So once you finish that, you're gonna go straight into the application, and the first thing to do is filling out your personal information. It shows a little dial on, there's 4 separate sections of the application you need to fill out, and it shows a little dial of how much you've completed. So I recommend starting out that personal information. It's probably the easiest part of the application. You can get it out of the way and you'll have one section completed. It's basically asking about your contact information, like your race, your ethnicity, your gender, are you in the military, all that kind of stuff, just general information about yourself. And then there's one portion at the end, that's an explanation statement. So in that section, you're gonna talk about anything that's happened in school that you think you need to explain a little bit. So if you had to leave for like medical reasons, if you got like a failing grade in a class, if you had like some disciplinary action, that's your chance to explain yourself so they can understand where you're coming from. For example, I had gotten a D in a class and I had to retake it, so I took that section to explain why I had gotten a D in that class and what was going on in my life that I thought led to me getting a D in that class, and then how I corrected it later on. So that's your chance to kind of like disclaimer, like explain something that you want to go a little more into detail with. So that completes the first step. If you can get all that done, you're 1/4 of the way. So after that, the next portion is your academic history. So here it's going to ask you for what high school you went to, or if you've gone to multiple high schools, which high schools you went to. It's going to ask you to list the universities you went to. And if you're like me, who Florida State University was my home university, that's where I graduated from college, but over the summer I would take classes like back home, or I would take online classes at different schools that Florida State didn't offer. So I ended up technically attending like 6 different universities. So that's something to add in. And if you took any like dual enrollment classes in high school, you would also include that university you took it at in that section. So all your high schools and then your undergraduate universities. So after that, your next step is to insert your transcript. This is probably the most tedious part of the application because you need to include every single college level course you've taken since high school. So if you took dual enrollment, AP classes, IB classes, if you passed those exams and got the college credit, it needs to be included. So from high school until you graduate, you're gonna input every single class, how many credits it was worth, the description of the class, what grades you got. It's a lot, but it's fine because if you just get all your transcripts, look them up online, you have it all there. You just have to enter everything manually, even though you're sending them your transcripts anyway. But it's fun. One thing to also keep in mind is, once again, if you're filling this application out in the fall but you don't graduate until the spring, you would still include all those spring classes, but there's a section to put like planned, that you haven't completed it, you just put it's planned, but you need to put that because you need to make sure you have all your prerequisites complete, and even classes that aren't prerequisites you would include as well. It's just every single class should be on there. All right, and then the next portion in that section of the application is going to be your GRE. So if you've taken the GRE already, you would indicate yes, you would put the date that you've taken it, and you would put in your registration code so they can look at it. But if you haven't taken it yet, that's fine. You just put no and you put planned. And later, once you do take it, you need to send the scores in. But you need to make sure that you take it like a few weeks before the deadline of the application, because it takes a couple weeks for your grades to process, I think, and send to the school. So make sure that you take the GRE at least like 3 weeks before the deadline for application. And for that, I just recommend, I've said it in another video before, but what I did was the Princeton Review book, and it tells you a lot of like tips and tricks to cracking the GRE, because if you were good at the SAT, the GRE isn't too different, but it is definitely like steps above the SAT. Like, it's definitely more rigorous and the words are more difficult, and the math is geometry, which I hadn't taken since like 10th grade. So those review books really help like jogging your memory and good ways to tackle those math questions, how to tackle your essays, how to go about those reading questions. And then also I recommend the GRE flashcards, because those will be so beneficial. If you could memorize those flashcards, you will be set. The reading portion, they just use really big vocab, and like not even words that you've heard before and you're like, oh, that's a tough word, like I can figure it out. Like, these are words that I swear I don't know where they brought them from. But if you could remember the flashcards, the way I did it was like say I started in June. I started studying in June and I knew I was taking the GRE in August. So I divided it up. There was 500 flashcards. So I divided up the flashcards per the amount of days I had to study, and the way it came out was that like I had to memorize 17 flashcards a day, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's kind of difficult to like make sure you're memorizing and actually remembering these words. So the earlier you start, we're already in June actually, so if you start now, you'll be better off. That way you don't have to like cram a lot of words every single day. But that's just what I recommend, and I'll leave in the description below the books that I used and the flashcards I used. They also included like practice exams, which I really think would be beneficial for you to do. If you can get a great score like off the bat, that saves you a lot of time, especially if you're taking your GRE later. I took my GRE in September, so I literally waited until like the last possible second, and I didn't have the opportunity to retake it if my score was bad. So the earlier you take the GRE, it gives you like time, because I think there's like, you have to wait a couple weeks or like a month or something. I'm not sure the exact time frame, but you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can retake it. So if you don't do well the first time, you want to make sure you're leaving yourself enough time to retake it if you need to. Okay, so the third section is going to include your supporting information, and that's going to include 3 subsections, which are your instructor evaluations, your achievements, and your experiences. So with your evaluations, you have to pick 2 veterinarians and 1 professor to evaluate you. What I was told by a vet school like academic advisor was you're given the option of if you want to see how they evaluate you or if you don't want to see it. And I was told to go ahead and check you don't want to see what they say, because according to the lady that I was speaking to, she said, who worked on the board of veterinary medicine for one of the schools I was applying to, she said that it looks like you're unsure of what they might say about you, so you want to make so if by checking yes, it's like, oh, they might say something bad, I want to see what they say. So I don't know, she said it looks better to check no, so I just checked no. And I think it also makes your instructors feel like they can be a little more honest, because they might be a little nervous knowing that, oh, they checked yes, they're going to see everything I wrote. But honestly, you shouldn't even be worried anyway. You got it in the bag. They're probably going to tuck you up anyway. So it didn't matter for me. I checked no. But once again, you want to put 2 veterinarians and 1 instructor, and preferably people who have known you for like quite some time, so they can talk about you like on a personal level, and so they can sound like they really know you. They know your strengths, they know your weaknesses, they know how bad you want this. So, and then also make sure that so what you do is you type in their email, their title. I think you say like where they work. I'm not 100% sure, but you might put in where they work, but you say whether they're a veterinarian or a professor, and it emails them their evaluation form. But you want to make sure that you get that done like as soon as possible, because you want to give them as much time as possible to fill out your evaluation. You don't want them to have to rush and write maybe like a not so great evaluation. Give them all the time possible, and then just let them know, hey, check your email. Oh, definitely beforehand ask them if they're okay with it. That way it's like no surprise and they're not doing anything they're uncomfortable doing. I'm sure they'll say yes, but definitely ask them beforehand, hey, do you mind if I use you as a reference to evaluate me for vet school? If it's someone you've been working alongside with, they're gonna know you wanted to go to vet school anyway, and I'm sure they're expecting you to ask, but definitely ask beforehand. And then once you include them in the email, let them know, okay, the email sent out, the due date is this, and then remind them, because a lot of times these are busy people, they've got other things going on, they might forget. So like after a few weeks go by, be like, oh hey, don't forget the deadline is my instructors, or the people that I put for my evaluations, like they continuously like came to me like, hey, when is that due again? And I was like, oh yeah, September, don't forget. But the earlier you get it out of the way, the earlier they'll have the opportunity to get it out of the way. Okay, so the next portion under the supporting information is going to be your experiences, which is another pretty tedious section, because you're going to need to put all your animal-related experiences, whether it's veterinary or non-veterinary, your volunteer experiences, your research, your employment history, your extracurriculars, everything you've done basically outside of school in this. And I included experiences from my freshman year of high school. So I had like 8 years worth of information to put into that. And this is where that book really comes in handy. If you start it early off, if you're in high school now, you can start that so that you can remember, because I'm sure I left out a ton of stuff that I couldn't remember, but I was just going off of like the big things that I did remember. So I volunteered at horse clinics, I volunteered at horse ranches, wildlife rescues, zoos, research you did. That's something I also talked about in another video, but if you're in university right now, in undergrad, and if you haven't graduated yet, a research opportunity is something really big that a lot of schools look for. I recommend finding a professor in a class that you really enjoy. And what I did was I went to that professor and I was like, I really enjoy your class. Like, do you have any research positions available or opportunities? And he in particular didn't have anything, but the TA for that class did. So he like sent me in his direction, and I just gave him my my resume, and he ended up letting me help him, and it was the best experience ever. He opened so many doors for me. I loved that experience. I loved working for him. I loved working with him. He was basically like my mentor. I still talk to him this day. I'm so grateful for him. So if you're able to get into a research position, that would be amazing, and then you also would include that in everything you did in your application. So also another important thing is to make sure that you're including employment or jobs that you've had outside of veterinary medicine. That was my mistake. I only included vet-related jobs, and later on, one of the schools I didn't get into, I was talking to the admissions people and they were like, oh, did you do any other jobs? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm a lacrosse coach. And they're like, why didn't you put that in your application? That would have been great. And I was like, I don't know, I wasn't thinking. So any other jobs you have outside of veterinary medicine, go ahead and put that in there. It shows that you're well-rounded, that you're tried out different things. I don't know, that you're working hard in school. So just make sure you put everything about anything that you're involved in. Clubs, all that kind of stuff. All right, so then the third portion of the supporting information is gonna be your achievements. So in here, I included scholarships I had gotten, even in high school, scholarships that I had gotten that would help me out in college. I put those in there. Certificates, so I did a program in high school where I was a certified veterinary assistant, so I put that in there. I put academic recognition, so if you were on the dean's list, if you were in honor roll, all that kind of stuff, and then honor societies in undergrad. I was in a National Honor Society type thing, so I put that in there as well. Okay, so the last portion is your program materials, and this is information that's pertinent to the particular schools you chose to apply to. So they're gonna ask for like, it's usually gonna be essays that they want you to answer. So it all depends on the schools you chose and what they are asking for, but more than likely it's gonna be like essays or like questions about you. Just make sure at the end that you go onto the websites for these schools, because a lot of them are going to require their own applications along with the VMCAS. So, and they're going to require application fees as well. All the schools I applied to had a supplemental application. It's not like as in-depth as the VMCAS, it's just like little essays. Some of them ask you to print out forms and give them to professors and have them evaluate you and mail it into the school. That was something I had to do. You have to pay like additional fees, and the price varies depending on the school. So make sure you're checking the school's website, looking at their vet med page, and applying on there as well. So basically that's all I have for you guys today. If there's any questions you have, please leave them for me down below. I will be more than happy to answer them for you. So this is all based off of my personal experience when I was filling out the VMCAS application and the advisors I had spoken to. So it's not like one way or the highway. You don't have to do everything that I had said, but this is just hopefully makes it a little bit easier and gives you guys an idea of how to go about filling out your application. And like I said, please, please, please leave any questions you have in the comments. And if there's anything in particular you'd like me to make a video about, go ahead and let me know about it, because I'm more than happy to answer what you guys want to know. All right, I hope you guys enjoy your summer, and I'll see you next time.